Welcome, shalom everyone. Welcome to our weekly study in the Torah portion. Is Torah portion for this week is Shoftim, and in this study, in this lesson, we're gonna cover certain subjects such as what are the judges that this Torah portion is talking about, what are the gates, what is basically, or who are the witnesses that are needed in order to require a conviction or punishment and all that. Also, we're going to be talking about the prohibition of idolatry and sorcery within the people of Israel. What does that mean? What is the secret behind it? Also, we're going to be talking about the people that are supposed to go to war and they just build a home, planted a vineyard, married, or they were afraid or soft-hearted. What is the secret behind it, and how that actually has to do with corrections or with the correction of the soul? And also the laws of when they will attack a city. What is that city? Is it a real city? Is it something else? We're gonna see the mystery of what is called a city, which we have covered in a previous parsha as well. Also, we're gonna be talking about the fruit trees and the trees that don't give fruit, and the mystery behind the words "for man is a tree in the field." And we're gonna cover some other subjects as well. So stay with us so we can together open the gates of these mysteries in this parsha. See you later. Shalom and welcome back. We're studying Parsha Shoftim. Parsha Shoftim is found in the book of Devarim. That's Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 18 to chapter 21, verse 9. And to summarize this parsha talks about the instruction of Moses to the people of Israel to appoint judges in their gates. And that's if in every city that they are going to construct or are going to live inside the land of Israel. And he emphasizes twice in a word called justice shall you pursue. And the reason he mentions this word tzedek, we're going to study the mystery of why it's twice and not once. And the other thing this parsha talks about is about when a matter of a crime is investigated, it has to be investigated, and evidence has to be also investigated. And there has to be a minimum of 2 witnesses to require conviction or punishment. It also, in this parsha, he instructed the people of Israel that in every generation there will be people that will be interpreting and applying the laws of the Torah. And it says specifically, according to the law that they will teach you, and the judgment they will instruct you, you shall do. You shall not turn away from the things that they say to you, to the right, not to the left. And this is basically alludes, to the oral Torah and the different interpretations of the different commandments, and also some additions of rabbinical commandments that were added as well in order to complement. Because you have to remember, when we started the book of Genesis, we said that the Creator created the universe, the Creator created everything, but human beings are also co-creators. They're part or partners on that creation as well. So the same thing was with the Torah. The Torah was given to the children of Israel, but it was up to the children of Israel how these things were going to be applied, and also if there was something that needed to be complemented in order to make the practice or the observancy of the correction, talking in Kabbalistic terms, uh, happen more precise, then it was up to human beings to add something to complement that, not to add something that the creator always going to go against the creator. Sometimes we see that in religion. But it was to complement what the creator was giving. Also, in this parsha, we see that there are laws concerning idolatry and sorcery. And we're going to talk about, specifically in the beginning, we're going to talk about the Asherah. What is Asherah? Right? It's an idolatrous, tree. And also there's pillars also that they talk about here. And it also talks about cities of refuge for those that have killed someone without fault. And also it gives rules for war, with exemption from battle from one who just, there are exemption for people that basically had just built a home, planted a vineyard, got married, or they were afraid to go to war. And then also says that before you attack, you have to offer peace. And we're going to study the meaning of that, the secrets behind what that terms of peace means and what is the city that is going to be attacked. The prohibition against destroying something just for the sake of destroying it, destroying something of value just for the sake of destroying it. Specifically, this is exemplified in the law of to not cut down the fruit trees when you're basically laying siege into a city, and then we see these words that say, "For man is a tree in the field," and we're gonna study that mystery as well. Then at the end, the parsha ends with the law of what is called eglah harufa, which is when a person is killed by somebody that nobody knows, and the body is found in the field, and it's the responsibility of the community and the leaders to basically take care of that body, and also for them to look at what they can do in order to prevent this from happen again, right? So let's start studying our parsha. We're gonna start talking about Shoftim. Shoftim can be translated as judges. In here, it says Shoftim ve-shetrim, judges and officers, and judges and officers basically in modern terms would be exactly judges and police officers, right? In modern terms, right? But here he's talking about judges and officers in a city, right? Specifically in the gates of your city, the city gates. And he says, judges and officers are you appoint in your city gates, which Hashem, God, your God gives you. Appointed them for your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous justice. You shall not pervert justice, you shall not show favoritism, and you shall not take a bribe. For the bribe will blind the eyes of the wise and make foolish the words of the righteous. Righteousness shall you pursue, so that you will live and inherit the land that Hashem your God gives you. So, based on the Zohar Volume 1, page 12b, this verse, when it talks about Shoftim, the Shetrim, it's talking about basically angels. And this is based on the Zohar set. He says in Tehillim, Psalms 91:11, he will command his angels for you. So each person has two angels, and this is based on the teachings of Rabbi Yaakov Abu Hasseira. Each person has two angels, and these two angels are with the person all the days of his or her life, right? And one angel Basically, in order to put it in this way, one angel is good, one angel is bad. One angel blesses the person for the good things, another person accuses the person for the bad things. And basically, what is happening is the following. Is that a person every day, when a person wakes up every day, they need to wake up and strengthen themselves for the everyday things that they do, for the path that they have ahead, because it's not an easy path. During this walk that they have, they need to strengthen themselves in order to fight the Yetzer Hara, which is the evil inclination. And these angels will travel or encamp based on the actions of the person. If you heed the warnings that the good angel will give you, you will know what not to do. If you hear the warnings of the bad angels or advices of the bad angels, you also will know what not to do. So the judges and officer, these are the angels that the Creator sent to a person in order to guide them. And you're gonna say, why he sent a bad angel to a person? Because each part of creation has a purpose, and this angel, what we call bad angel, but it's not necessarily a bad angel, is basically like a computer program. He cannot change his view of what, or his mission. His name is based on his mission. You change the name of an angel, you're changing the mission of an angel. So these angels are there in order to do exactly what they were appointed to do. So they, even though they're just there to give you advice, whether it is good or bad. You ultimately are the one who's going to take care of yourself by doing the right thing. So it says here, judges and officers shall you appoint. Literally, when you read the Hebrew, it says Titen lecha. Titen lecha means basically you shall give to yourself, and this is the thing, even though it says shall you appoint, when you read the Hebrew, it really should be translated as you shall give yourself. In that way, it means that you should be the one that should guard yourself from every evil that is out there, or every evil action that you may do. Okay, and in your city, they call Sha'arecha. So in all your gates, the city was added by the translator, but it says in all your gates. What are these gates? So these gates are the following, and this is based on Kabbalah. And Rabbi Yaakov Buchatzir utilizes sources like the Ari and the Zohar for his teachings. And the gates are the following: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, the hands, the legs, and the heart. And they're referred as gates because of the action they perform. You are the one who's responsible to see things that are good instead of looking or reading things that are bad. You're responsible for smelling, hearing, tasting things that are good for your body or for your mind, in the case of hearing. If you listen to Lashon Hara, if you listen to all this evil speech that is out there, you are the one who decides whether you're going to let that in or not. The same thing if you're supposed to follow kosher, which is the foods that are allowed in order to attune ourselves with the spiritual realm. You are the one who decides if you are going to do that or not. The same thing with what we do with our hands. Our hands are made to create, to make us advance as a species, but also it's our purpose. We are supposed to give with them, and give to other people, or we're supposed to take for our own, use them in an egoistic way. The same thing with the legs. Are we going to walk in the path of light, or are we going to be walking in the path of darkness or life? And the heart is basically the sum of our desires, So the heart is basically what we call Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem. Are we gonna make this heart holy, or are we gonna make this heart a place where, just like the physical Jerusalem, everybody's fighting for it and nobody's winning because we're not thinking about sharing for the sake of sharing. We're thinking about taking for the sake of taking, and that's something that we need to pay attention when we're reading this parsha. That it's not talking necessarily, even though physically this applies to a regular city or a regular place, it applies also to our own body, which is called a little city, a small city. And then he says, which Hashem, your God, gives you. And then he says, Naten lecha le shebatecha. So the word shebet, which is the word for tribe, here basically says, Hashem, your God, gives you, I point them to your tribes, also means rod. And rod basically has to do with severity, has to do with geburah. And if you remember when Moshe with his staff hit the rock, and we talked about that, it's basically geburah against chesed and bringing the waters, right? Waters means chesed. So each staff also means geburah. So the staff of Moshe, the staff of Aharon, is basically, Moshe and Aharon represents the side of chesed. So it's basically geburah being sweetened or controlled by the side of mercy, right? So basically seeing here, what we see is the same thing that has to do with justice, right? And that's the reason it says tribes, right? But it says here, you shall judge the people with righteous justice, it's mishpat tzedek. So it's a mix of geburah and chesed. You cannot have geburah only because you're basically being unjust. You cannot have chesed only because you also will be unjust. And that's why later it says, you shall not pervert justice, you shall not show favoritism, because if you go one way or the other, it's like eating from the tree of good and evil. You're not in the center, which is the tree of life. So this is basically what he's talking here about, being on the center line. And when geburah and chesed work together, when geburah is sweetened by chesed, you got that middle line. You got that middle line where you have Tiferet, Yesod, Malchut, right? And Keter in the top. And when he says, you shall not take a bribe, it just means, do not listen to the Yetzer Hara, the evil angel that is going to be there, right? And because the bribe will blind your eyes. And like I mentioned in our previous video in the Parsha Re, the eyes have to do a lot with basically what was happening in the book of Bereshit, when Eve, before she sinned or before she ate from the tree of life, she saw that the tree was good. It was good for the eye. It was good also for eating. So that's how sin starts to get into our small city called the body, and the guf in Hebrew, and it's through the eyes for what we see, right? So you gotta make sure that you don't take bribe from the Yetzer Hara, because it will blind the eye and you will not see what's really happening in there. And when he says tzedek, tiridov, it's righteousness are you pursue. The word righteousness is written twice as a repeated warning that you shall pursue truth and justice to the extreme, right? But also, the word tzedek is related to the word tzedakah. And tzedakah is translated as charity. But in reality, it's like make things right, right? if a person is given much charity, he should never think that he has given enough. Rather, he should continue to give more. And we talk about tzedakah at the end of the last video in Parsha Shoftim about giving for the sake of giving, not to the point that you end up poor, right? Because you gotta also give to you, to this body. You gotta maintain this body as it is alive. But these words, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, righteousness, righteousness, you shall pursue. The initial letters of them, tzadik, tzadik, tav, spell the word tzitzit without the letter yod. Alright? So this gives us a little hint that you should be fulfilling the mitzvah of the tzitzit. And it's not only wearing the tzitzit, which is the little fringes in the four corners of your shirt or undershirt, or if you wear a talit katan or a talit, it is the meaning behind wearing that is important, right? It is the meaning of remembering 613 corrections or commandments that needs to be performed, not only by us but by all those who call themselves part of Israel. Moreover, this letter have the numerical value of 580, the same as the word tefillin. Tefillin is the little phylacteries, little black boxes that you're gonna see in some of the Jewish male, and some females are using them as well. Real Kabbalists, not Kabbalists that use religion in order to translate Kabbalah, but those Kabbalists that use Kabbalah in order to see what religion is all about. They can tell you that a woman can wear a tefillin, there's no problem with it, a talit, and even though there's no obligation, they're not supposed to do this type of correction, but if they have the desire, why not, right? They're not changing anything in heaven other than having the desire to please the Creator. So if that's what they want, they can do it, because women, they don't have to perform as much corrections as males. That's why most of the commandments are for the males, because the males are the ones that broke and need to come together in order to give to the females. The females, they connect instantly with spirituality. They don't need a talit, they don't need a tefillin, they don't need tzitzit or anything like that to connect. You teach them Torah, they connect easily. A man, everything has to be filtered through symbols, make it interesting in order for them not to lose their attention. It has to be, in a different way. It has to be like a game. So you have to give them, these, I would say, kind of like toys in order for them to play. In that way you make it interesting, and somehow they connect to the real source of this symbolism. So that's why, these commandments, even though they're important, you should not judge a person from the opposite sex, a female, for trying to put a tefillin or talit. There's halakha about it, and that should be understood. If you're in a religious community, you should respect that. But if a woman is doing it out of love for the Creator, who am I to judge? Right? I'm not the Creator. The Creator put that love in her heart, that desire. Who am I to judge that? Right? So think about that. And let's go now to chapter 16, verse 21 to verse 22. You shall not plant for yourself an idolatrous tree, any tree near the altar of Hashem, your God, that you shall make for yourself, and you shall not erect for yourself a pillar with Hashem, your God, hates. So here is basically talking about Asherah. And Asherah, it's basically a tree that was used in order to worship the feminine aspect of creation, and basically they made a goddess out of this aspect of creation without basically knowing what's the real. Like in Kabbalah, we go like one depend on the other. You cannot be worshiping one part of God, the finger of God only. We don't go like that. That's idolatry. You are idolizing something that is not the real thing. The real thing is the whole thing. So these forces of creation, the force of nature, how nature actually have 4 seasons. Nature has 4 seasons. Nature has, sometimes forces that are not good for human beings. So people in the past used to think if we please this force of creation, in this case the force of fertility, the force that will give us, a good yield in our harvest, maybe we do good. We scratch the back of that God will scratch our back. And that's why a lot of idolaters, practices were found in ancient Israel. And Moshe is warning them about that because back then, before it became the land of Israel, it was called Canaan. And basically what it's saying is the following. When you do that and you call yourself part of Israel, what you're doing is the following. It's like having this, the Shekhinah. You have the Shekhinah, the holy presence of the Creator, which is Kabbalah Israel, the congregation of Israel. We have that power in us, a feminine power, feminine soul, that we need to connect with the Creator. When we give ourselves to idolatry, what we're doing is we're changing the Shekhinah for another soul that is not pure. And that soul is called Lilith. Lilith, some call it a demon, some call it that. If you study the book of Parsha according to Kabbalah, you're going to see she was the first wife of Adam, and she wanted to be in the top. Adam in the bottom. She wanted to be in the top. So she wanted to be like, in Kabbalah they teach, the male is a bestower and the female is a receiver. She didn't want to receive, she wanted to be like the male. So they were basically separated, and then another female was made, which is Chava, Eve, and that's when Adam recognized, oh, this one really is part of me. We complement each other. We're not apart. So Lilith is one of those characters that you're gonna find in the Zohar, Lilith and the angel Samael. And these two forces, or entities, whatever you want to see them, but they're forces, and they're forces of Tumah, forces of evil, and they are not evil things that are out there that we need to worry about because they're gonna do something bad to us. No, they are within ourselves. They're part of ourselves. We need to be careful what we do, that we're connected constantly with the forces of holiness and not with the forces of darkness, because we can exchange the Shekhinah for Lilith. And then at the same time what we're doing is we're bringing down the Shekhinah lower and lower. Instead of raising the Shekhinah up to the upper realms, we're bringing her lower and lower, to the point that it says here, according to the Zohar, it says, because of a slave who reigns and a maidservant who inherits the mistress. This is based on Proverbs chapter 30, verse 20 and 23. And that is when we, as people of Israel, don't follow the will of the Creator, the maidservant inherits the place of the mistress. So we're changing the Shekhinah, and we're putting Lilith as basically the queen. And then the abundance that is intended for the Shekhinah instead goes to the dark forces. So we're opening the gates to something that is not supposed to receive anything. It's supposed to be corrected before you receive anything, right? And we're going to talk about how these things are corrected later. So the slave who reigns basically refers to Samael, who reigns, and it means that the Shekhinah now becomes like his queen, So that's something that we don't want. And I know it sounds, kind of like a fairy tale thing, but that's what the Zohar uses in order to make you think what you're doing. You're bringing down this lofty, beautiful soul down lower to a point that is with a force of darkness, because there's a tree of life of light, and there's a tree of life of darkness, and you're bringing this to that tree of life of darkness, while at the same time opening the gates of to feed with this abundance souls or forces that are not corrected yet to receive that, because their correction depends on our correction, right? So the idolatrous tree, Asherah, is basically Lilith. So that's why they cannot be close to any part near the altar of Hashem. So, and these have to do also with the tree of life. It says an idolatrous tree, says Asherah kol etz. An idolatrous tree, any tree. This refers to the name of the Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, which is, as we know, called the tree of life, the Etz HaChaim, and that is entirely good, right? Etz HaTov. However, there's also the tree of evil, the Etz HaRa, which is entirely evil, and there's also the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And when the name Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh provides abundance for the evil meat servant, that means Lili, becomes a tree of good and evil. The Etz HaTov Vera. This is the meaning of any tree. That once there's a mixture of this tree and their seed, this idolatrous tree is planted that represent an intertwining of the holy and the profane. Then this tree of life, which is all good, becomes no different than any other tree in the forest. So you're gonna hear a lot about people saying, you don't mix Kabbalah with Buddhism, you don't mix Kabbalah with Hinduism, you don't mix Kabbalah with yoga and all kind of stuff. And in reality, there's a lot of things that are similar but not necessarily the same. And this is basically what it says here, that you cannot do that close to the altar of Hashem. So if I'm teaching you Kabbalah, even though I may have some knowledge about Buddhism or things like that, I cannot be teaching you about Buddhism when I'm teaching you Kabbalah. I'm mixing them, together, because that's like mixing these two forces. And we can go, back and forth on this when we talk also about the children of Abraham that were sent to the east with gifts. Why they were sent? They were sent to the east with gifts and all that kind of. So these are people that follow Buddhism, Hinduism, and all that. And that's why there's some similarities, but it's not necessarily the same, because in Kabbalah we teach, that it is according to the level of the soul, that soul will understand and have a relationship as well with the Creator. So that's why we cannot mix one thing with the other, because, and let's put it this way, if you want to really advance spiritually, you have to stick to one path. Yes, you can go to other paths and see, reference to them in order for you to be more open-minded and learn how other people see spirituality in the reality that we live. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you're gonna mix now over here. I will not have I have seen it, I want to have a statue of Buddha in front of 2 candles of Shabbat. I've seen that. Some people have done that. For me, cannot do that, in the sense that these are 2 different systems. And when you mix them, then you're just destroying the whole thing. This is why these systems are created, because you follow this system and eventually you're going to reach something. But if you mix them together, you're going to get nowhere. You're just gaining knowledge and no advance, and there's no advancement spiritually. So that's why sometimes we don't like to mix Kabbalah with all these other things. And if you are a religious rabbi who teaches Kabbalah, they're more strict. They really go like, that's idolatry. That's it, period. So, and you can go to any Kabbalist who is Orthodox Jew or anything like that, they would tell you that's idolatry. So my advice to you is don't do it, don't mix it, don't mix Kabbalah with anything like that, okay? Alright, so let's go now, because our time is running out. There's an allusion here, and I'm just gonna go over it, but this is a whole different class that has to do with the temple. When it says, if a matter of justice is hidden from you, between blood and blood, between verdict and verdict, between plague and plague, matters of dispute in your cities, you shall stand up and ascend to the place that Hashem your God shall choose. You shall come to the Kohanim, Levites, and to the judge who will be in those days, and you shall inquire, and they will tell you the word of justice. So basically, even though here he's talking, about the whole system of if you inquire about something that there's no reconciliation between parts or anything like that, then you shall go to the Holy of Holies place, which is Temple Mount. Even though it doesn't say here, but it's implied when it says, El Hamakom Asher Yabecher Adonai Elohecha Bo, to the place that Hashem your God shall choose, because in the future that will be Jerusalem, right? And but there's something implying here. It's something called the Teiku, and Teiku is an acronym for the Eliyahu Hanabi, the Tishbi, will come and explain the difficulties and questions. And it says, that Eliyahu is going to come before the Mashiach, and he will be actually explaining all these things that have not been reconciled and all that between the sages of the Mishnah and the Talmud. And at the end, when it says to the place that Hashem shall choose, it says that this will be basically alludes to when the Mashiach will arrive, may speedily in our days, right? But specifically, it talks about the Beit HaMishkan. So, on chapter 18, verse 9 to the 13th verse, it says, when you come to the land of Hashem your God, when you come to the land that Hashem your God gives you, you shall not learn to act according to the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you a person who passes his son or daughter through fire. A person, this is for idolatry, they used to sacrifice their kids to, I think it was about Molech. A person who practices divination. And this is the part that in the future we're going to have a seminar about astrology. It says, because it says here, it is translated, an astrologer, a person who reads omen, and a sorcerer, or an animal charmer, or a person who inquires of the idolatrous practices of or Yidoni, or a person who consults the dead. For anyone who does this is an abomination of Hashem. And because of these abominations, Hashem your God banishes the nations before you. You shall be wholehearted with Hashem your God. So, when you come to the land, it says when you reach that level of Shekhinah, because the land is Shekhinah, and this is when we talk about the 10 spies that were talking bad about the land, and all that, basically we talk about it, and we said, that what they were talking about was bad about the Shekhinah. It was impossible to reach the Shekhinah. But here we have now the children of Israel this close to reach the Shekhinah, the land of Israel, right? So when they reach the land, the Shekhinah, they have to make sure that they don't follow the ways of sorceries and magic. And they don't practice divination and all these things. However, and this is something that we're gonna touch base, the translation for astrologer sometimes it's kind of off in the sense, that not necessarily means astrologer. It means a person who see omens in the stars, because there's also something that the Jews or Israelites used to use, and they were astrologers as well. And it was they used the pattern of the stars in order to predict the seasons, in order to know what month was, in order to know when to plant, so they can have the best harvest. And that has nothing to do with astrology. That has to do with patterns in creation. That has to do with how the earth travels around the sun. And that's a different kind of astrology, right? But the astrology that is calling here is a person that look at the stars, and whenever Mars supposedly is in this house that they call, the house of this and that, that will affect us. Well, Abraham was that kind of astrologer, but what he found was that everything was one. He found that everything is one. So there's basically what he saw was that they might point at something. They might say, according to this science, if you want to call it science, astrology, they might point at something, but that necessarily means that something is going to happen. Maybe what is pointing is a patterns in creation, that when something happens, it will have certain consequences. And what can we do in order to mitigate those consequences? Or, if it's good, basically have a way to amplify the consequences, so they're better for us. And that's the secret of the 72 names of God. They basically are supposed to be used through meditations in order to mitigate or amplify the supposed influence of the stars, right? But in reality, if you're a Kabbalist that really looking for spiritual things, we don't pay attention to that a lot. There will be a seminar about it anyway that I'm gonna have about it, because it's based on this verse, and also a lot of practices that we see in some modern Kabbalists that uses mostly astrology, sometimes more than Kabbalah, in order to give spiritual advice to those who are looking for the truth about spiritual life and also the meaning of their lives. All right. So now let's go to battle. This is chapter 20. So when you go out to battle against your enemy, and you see a horse and a chariot. Okay, so the horse and the chariot, this is what you need to, we're going to go through this so you can understand what's happening here. Your enemy is the Yetzer Hara, the oppositor of anything good that you want to do in your life, right? So when you go, there's something that they're going to have, a horse and a chariot. Who's the horse? The horse is Lilith, and the chariot is Samael, the two evil forces, or two angels that we talk about that are not there for any good. And it says that you're going to see that they're numerous than you. Do not fear them, because Hashem, your God, is with you, who brought you from the land of Egypt. So you have to remember about that. Basically, you have ascended all the way to the point of the Shekhinah, but these angels are going to continue, being in the way, and you're going to have to battle against them. And don't forget, you are supported, because in Kabbalah, as we say, those who come to purify are helped by the Creator, are helped by the light. All right? And it says here, that when we're close to go to war, the Kohen, who represents the side of Chesed, will speak to the people, and he will tell them basically, "Hear, O Israel," right? And then it says, "You are coming near today to the battle against your enemy, lest your heart not be faint. Do not be afraid. Do not panic. Do not, be broken before them. And here basically is telling you that the secret of Hear, O Israel, it says basically Ve'omer Alehem Shema Israel. And we have that Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O God, the Lord, our God is one, right? Hear Israel, the Lord, our God is one. Basically, so you need to understand, if you identify yourself with Israel, it is because at the end, you or your forefather Jacob, he fought against the angel Samael, and he was blessed with that name Israel. And this name Israel is basically a contraction of Sharara, you rule, and Elohim, meaning angel of God. And this indicates that Jacob rules over all. As Samael is the chief angel over the forces of impurity, Israel is the king or ruler over the forces of Kedusha, forces of holiness, right? So that's important. Remember we said about Shema Israel, how Shema Israel should be used in order to destroy these things that come from you, especially these evil spirits in our previous video. If you want to see the previous video, so you can connect that dot with this dot in here, right? Let your heart be faint, you're coming near today, Hear, O Israel. And it says here that the word Shema is an acronym for Shecharit, Minchat, and Arvit, which is morning, afternoon, and evening, meaning the 3 times a day that basically the Yetzer Hara is going to try to, it's interesting because when we say Yetzer Hara, it comes to harass you, right? So think about that, it means, that's the importance of being always in constant prayer, not only in appointed times, which is the Saharit, Mincha, and Arvit, which is the morning, afternoon, and evening, but also constant prayer, which is a constant introspection and awareness of what we're doing. This is the word tefillah, prayer, may be arranged to spell hapalet, actually, which means downfall. Through these prayers, through this tefillah, we will actually make the forces of Tumah lower their strength. So that's the importance of this. So now we're going to talk about chapter 20, verse 5 to 7. And it says, then the officers shall speak to the people, who is the man who has built new house, who has not inaugurated? Let him go, return to his house. Later he die in the war, and another man will inaugurate it. Who is the man who has planted a vineyard and not redeemed it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the war, and another man will redeem it. And who is the man who has betrothed a woman and not marry her? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the war, and another man will marry her. So when he's talking about the house, the vineyard, and wife, this alludes to the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshamah. So basically what he's saying is, who's the man who built the house refers to the nefesh, and who has not inaugurated. So if you have not basically rectified the nefesh, you need to do it before you die. In that way, when you give back, your soul, that part of the soul, is not blemish, meaning doesn't have to reincarnate in another man. And that's the reason said, let him go and return to his house, and another man will inaugurate it. Meaning the nefesh will be given to another man. It will be reincarnated in a different body. Therefore, one must be strong like a lion to prevent the Yetzer Hara from defeating him. Okay? And then who is the man who planted the vineyard? That is actually referring to the ruach. And basically, like this person go back basically and rectify that. And by rectifying ruach, because you rectify the nefesh, you acquire ruach. Because you rectify the ruach now doesn't have to be reincarnated again another person in order to be rectified by another person. Now you acquire the nefesh, who is the man who has betrothed a woman, and a woman, basically refers to the neshamah, actually, not nefesh. So I misread that. Nefesh, ruach, and neshamah. So the neshamah, after a person gains a neshamah only after gaining a nefesh and a ruach, right? So the Torah is referring to a person who is gaining neshamah but has not yet rectified it, as much as a person who has betrothed a woman and has not married her. Regarding such a person, they need to go back and rectify the neshamah so they may keep it, and in that way the neshamah will not reincarnate in another body to be rectified by another person. So basically this is talking about reincarnation, right? And to make sure that what you need to do now, do it now before you die, right? Before you give back those lights to the Creator. And then he says, the officer shall continue speaking, who is the man who is fearful or faint-hearted? Let him go and return to his house. Let him not melt the heart of his fellows like his own heart. So, basically saying here, that the Yetzer Hatov and all the forces guide a person who's still weak and who does not apply his strength as he should. And they make sure he does not show his weakness to the other side, but show the person to learn from that weakness. Okay? And that's why I said, let him not melt the heart of his fellow in his heart. And when it shall be that the officer have finished speaking to the people, the leaders and the army shall take command and head of the people. So only when a person has acquired all these corrections, that person has great joy, he listens and accepts the warnings of the Yetzer Hatov, that he has also, counsel from the nefesh, ruach, and neshamah, which are the officers. Here, then the person can go to war properly, right? And going to war means fighting that internal war against the desires of egoism, desires to receive. So then he talks about when you shall draw near the city to wage war against it, you shall call out to it for peace. It shall be that if it answers you in peace and opens for you, then the entire people found within it shall be as tribute for you, and they shall serve you. But if it does not make peace with you, but makes war with you, you shall besiege it. Hashem shall deliver it to your hand, and you shall smite all the males by the sword. So when you draw near the city means basically a person's body is called a small city, and I think it's Proverbs where you can find that, chapter 9. And the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is attached to that city, right? And it says that you shall call out for peace. It means that you shall call out for peace by reciting the Shema, by learning Torah, by learning Kabbalah. And like it says here, Rabbi Yaakov Kaseda says that in Zohar volume 3, page 176b, he says that the Torah is called peace. So it says when you shall call out to it for peace, basically is that you are basically trying to transform this. And if these forces basically submit, then it's like in Kabbalah we teach like the angel of death now has become an angel of redemption, right? However, and they will serve you basically, so they become basically part of your redemption. But if it doesn't make peace with you by reciting the Shema, learning Torah, Kabbalah, and all that, then you shall smite them. Then you shall do everything you can, all the way, and in order to do that. And the only way you can subdue your body, according to Rabbi Yaakov Hasid, is by meditating on the day of your death. So to tell basically your body, you're not here forever, you will ultimately die, and your job is basically to help the nefesh, ruach, and neshamah to be purified. That's your job. What if I die? How many days, how many years, how many months I have left? I can count, if I'm healthy, that I may actually live 40, 50 years more or something like that. But if I'm ill, I may not have so much time, so what am I waiting for? Right? Things like that. And Hashem will deliver it to you, means that He will subdue it basically, and for the service of Him. So let's talk about this thing, a man is tree in the field. This is verse 19 and 20 in chapter 20th. And man is a tree in the field. It's basically saying when they go in, if the trees are giving fruit, do not cut them down. Trees are not giving any fruit. You may cut them down, but there's some laws not to cut them with certain instruments, cut them with different things. And this is the thing, what is a man basically, a tree in the field? I'm gonna refer to the book that I wrote called Opening the Gates of Creation, Kabbalah Insights in the book of Genesis, and in there, I have touched this theme a little bit, and I'm gonna read you something, and I hope you can see it here as well. Basically, it's that you have to see everything has a pattern, right? So you have the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. You're gonna have the lights of the soul, which is Yehidah, Chaya, Neshamah, Ruach, and Nefesh, according to those 4 letters. And you're gonna have also the parts of the guf, the parts of the body, which is the Moach, Atzamot, Gidim, Basar, and Or, right? And then places. With the tip of the Yod, there's no place, right? With the Yod, you're gonna have a house, a beit. With the first Hey, you're gonna have a Hatzer, which is a yard, and with the second, with the Vav, you're gonna have Sadeh, field. This is what they're talking here, Sadeh. And the second Hey is Midbar, desert. Okay. So what does it say here for a man is a tree in a field? Basically, he's talking about Zeramping. Alright? The Vav, Zeramping. Man is a tree in the field. Man should be, that, or achieve that, to become a fruitful tree, a tree that gives fruit, a tree that connects through its Yesod to Malchut. So basically, it's a connection between Adam and Adamah. Man, we created man, and they created earth, right? So that's something that we need to understand. And etz, when you look at the word etz, the word for tree, it's also related to the word eretz, the word for land, right? So the Israelites at this moment, they're going to Eretz Israel, which is the land of Israel, right? And the etz, they're gonna be etz in there, trees that give fruit and trees that don't give fruit. So there's gonna be forces that connect with the forces of Abba Ve'ima, which is Chokmah and Bina, and therefore these connections are gonna bring light down to the Shekhinah, to Malchut. Those things cannot be cut down. Basically saying, do not confuse these things with the other things. And it's basically going back to the Asherah and the pillars. That is like, this is looking at things in little parts. Looking at the whole computer right now that I'm using for this video, and I'm paying attention only to a key in the keyboard and that's the only thing I see, and I start worshiping that key in the keyboard because that's the God that I am worshiping. And here is telling you basically, nah, there's a lot more. But just because that K that you're worshiping, it's considered idolatry, doesn't mean you're gonna destroy all the keys, because each of them has, a purpose. However, it's not that you're gonna destroy them to the point, that I don't want to deal with, in this case, let's say the key in the keyboard for the letter U. If I'm missing the U, how am I gonna write any letter that uses the letter U, right? So think about that. What the Kabbalists basically are trying to tell us is that just because we tell you that worshiping this is idolatry, does not mean that this thing doesn't belong to the whole. It belongs to the whole. The problem is when you focus yourself to that only thing and you think that that's God. Because that's not God. God is much more. In fact, just to name God, or to give him names, it's even, I would say, putting something infinite into a box, which is impossible. In fact, to give God the name of an infinite being, we don't even know if it is a being. We don't know if it is beyond a being. We don't even know what infinite is. How are we going to know or name him infinite, right? So we name him according to things that we know, right? We try to connect with him with certain symbols like the tzitzit, the tefillin, and all kind of stuff. Now, when for me that's the most important thing, and I am not connecting to the other parts of my soul as well, I'm performing idolatry. So I'm basically doing the same thing that these people were doing, planting a tree, and that tree is me, and that I'm worshiping this tree, right? Without thinking that there's a forest out there, and this forest is composed of different trees, and all these different trees are important. So I am Ramon, but there's a whole bunch of other trees out there that have different names, and they also are important. They all belong to one soul, right? So we have to see the big picture. I cannot worship this guy only. That's idolatry, right? And idolatry as well. I have to see the whole picture, and when I see the whole picture, see the whole forest, I see now that there's a lot of trees out there. Should I worship those trees? No, I need to work together with those trees and for the best of those trees, because their betterment, the best they become, the best for me as well, right? And also, I need to understand that these trees are part of something bigger. They're part of creation as well, and that creation is part of something bigger, right? It's something that connects us then with the Creator, and that Creator is everything. So that's how you need to see it. Do not focus only on the small things that you see. This is more important for me. See the big picture, right? It's okay to study the small thing, as long as this small thing you put it in with the intention of knowing, or a start point to know the rest of the things. I can work on myself in order to become a better person, but anybody can be a better person by himself or herself, but it's not the same when you're in a group of people, right? It's very easy to be a saint by yourself, but when you're in a group of people, you have to deal with different characters, attitudes, and personalities, then the work is hard. So basically what it says here, that's why you need to have, those shoftim, those judges, and those officers. So whatever comes in, whatever you see, smell, eat, and everything, you're doing it only for the good of all, with the good of giving back to the Creator, not only for yourself. Okay. So I hope you have enjoyed this lesson in the Parsha. Next Parsha is gonna be Parsha Ki Tetzei, and I'll see you next week. So shalom, and if you see me before Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom.